أجمل ما تكون أن تخلخل المدى والآخرون بعضهم يظنك النداء بعضهم يظنك الصدى أجمل ما تكون أن تكون حجة للنور والظلام يكون فيك آخر الكلام أول الكلام والآخرون بعضهم يرى إليك زبدا وبعضهم يرى إليك خالقا أجمل ما تكون أن تكون هدفا مفترقا
Cyklon tropikalny. Ze wszystkich filozofów najbardziej lubiłem tego, który powiedział, że fale powstają przez wahanie się bogów. Czy świat, który znamy, jest dobry, czy też zły jest? I nadeszła chwila, by zalało go morze. I codziennie miłość wybawia nas od zguby. Bogowie wahają się, spacerują i puszczają kaczki w falach. Słońce wchodzi do morza tam, gdzie jest horyzont. I we mnie też jest ciemność, odrobina światła i czarne ślady stawiam na białych powierzchniach.
Oil. Involved one way or the other in oil exploration are costs, production costs, human costs, cultural costs, environmental costs. Traditional fuel depletes, as does tradition. Between lifestyles and conservation, between energy requirements and reasonable price, between fuel for all and domination of technology, the real value of oil goes missing. Every time a car engine starts, every time a pot of rice is cooked, every time the least trivial task is done, we do not speak to oil. We do not listen to oil.
True. 死人知道我们的谎言，在清晨，林间的鸟知道风，果实知道大地之血的灌溉，哭声知道高脚杯的体面。喉咙间的石头意味着亡灵在场，磕下它。猛兽的车轮需要它的润滑。碾碎人以及牙齿企图说出的真实，世界在盲人脑袋的裂口里扭动，黑暗从 那里来。
First, I'd like you to think, what is the most important boundary that you've crossed? And why was it important to you? And this particular boundary crossing, how did it have an effect on others? And was that effect on others important to you?
I came from a working class background. Again, it didn't typically produce writers, so it made sense for me. It made sense for me to not speak and to think of myself as someone who did not speak, who simply worked and loaded trucks, drove trucks. So to cross from that expected silence to some kind of literary speech was a very important move, and it took place over quite a long period of time.
During speaking now to you, to not be voiceless, I think, is the boundary I crossed as a woman writer in a very strong male tradition, bardic tradition of writing poetry, which is very hard because in Welsh, in the Welsh language, which is spoken by 500,000 people, and an endangered language.
The boundary that I crossed was more poetic, because when I started writing in the late 70s, the only kind of poetry that we had was the lyric poetry. And as you know, lyric poetry is based on the poet's personal feelings. And in fact, at that time and up to now, a lot of poets believe in the slogan that poetry is the expression of the poet's personal feelings. So I questioned that. I said, we human beings have not only the heart, we have the brain too. Where are we going to, why are we leaving out the cerebral part, the brain part, the thinking part in our poetry? So I crossed the border, and I broke down the rules of what poetry consists of.
For instance, in Australia, in Sydney, where I live, there's a very strong obsession with money and power, which is something I also see in Hong Kong very visibly. The fact of poetic language is something which crosses the boundaries of time and the boundaries of culture is something which is almost like a crucible of human experience that can survive those kinds of events. And so that's really brought that home to me very strongly.
对我个人来讲，最大的越界的行为就是，我想试图从自我走向他人，就是说，他渴望能够成为一个理解其他生命的这样的一个存在。
Si viniera un marciano, un ET, bajar a la Tierra, y la única información que tuviera el mundo fuesen los libros de poesía, lo más probable es que llegaría a la conclusión de que en la Tierra no ha pasado absolutamente nada, salvo algunas emociones privadas, salvo algunas angustias personales, salvo algunos problemas.
El mar. 1. Sorprendentes carnadas llueven del cielo. Sorprendentes carnadas sobre el mar. Abajo el océano. Arriba las inusitadas nubes de un día claro. Sorprendentes carnadas llueven sobre el mar. Hubo un amor que llueve. Hubo un día claro que llueve ahora sobre el mar. Son sombras. Carnadas para peces. Llueve un día claro, un amor que no alcanzó a decirse, el amor, así el amor. Llueven desde el cielo, asombrosas carnadas sobre la sombra de los peces en el mar. Caen días claros, extrañas carnadas pegadas de días claros, de amores que no alcanzaron a decirles. El mar, se dice del mar, se dice de carnadas que llueven y de días claros pegados a ellas, se dice de amores inconclusos, de días claros e inconclusos que llueven para los peces en el mar.
So Yenicut is an old, forgotten name of part of an island or continent. Out the screen door to flowers, fresh-cut grass, a low umbrellaed table, 2 Adirondack chairs between bushes step down to a thin stretch of sand, high tide hides leaves behind stones, shells, sea. Urubamba flow below Vilcapampa, city of stairways in the clouds, the way Castillo's quill trembled before the undreamed that was already dreamed. Ancient memory, Gandharva realm, keyed, stone, carved, angled, vicuña rug, their love for sun.
I reaktor. Berggrunden vrider sin massa och hamnar i rätt hack. Kontinentplattor kantrar och klyvs. Kom Leatherface, min älskade, glid in i ansiktet av hemlighetens bestialers längtan. Känn ytberöringen som kokar, skakar hårt under den sköra korngränshuden. Kom golem sjuder under kräldjuren av våra händers kroppar. Vid läderömsningen av blottlagda människoider. Glid in i kyssens tunga tunnelmaterial.
这些年我过得不错，只是爱不再恋爱，只是睡不再和女人睡，只是写不再诗歌。我经常骂人，但不翻脸，经常在南京，偶尔也去外地走走。我仍然活着，但不想长寿。这些年我缺钱，但不想挣钱，缺觉但不吃安定，缺肉但不吃鸡腿，头秃了那就让它秃着吧，牙蛀空了就让它空着吧，剩下的已经够用。胡子白了，下面的胡子也白了，眉毛长了，鼻毛也长了。这些年我去过一次上海，但不觉得上海的变化很大，去过一次草原，也不觉得天人合一。我读书只读1本，但读了7遍，听音乐只听1张 CD， 每天多听。字和词不再折磨我，我也不再折磨语言。
So I look upon translation as a growing organism or something. My poetry is not the end in Swedish. It's growing in English. It becomes something else. I don't know what. I would never write in English, even though I understand English a bit. But I would never write in it because I don't know the nuances of the language. So I can't see the deeper meaning in English.
I speak Filipino fluently. I would like to write in Filipino, but then Filipino is my domestic language, but not my thinking language. And that, I think, is a problem, but is also my situation. Globalization as a way of thinking about the circulation of ideas, and as a kind of counterpoint, or also to the circulation of people, I suppose.
The minor languages are in this situation of domination of English, for example. So I can say yes to globalization in a sense of discovery, and when we can share our poetry and our voices, but no for the domination or unification. Globalization as a unification, it's a bad thing, I think.
I think poetry and globalization is neither opponents or partners, because because globalization is basically unstoppable right now, because it's happening every day. And as a poet, I think what we can do is just to face the truth, because globalization is actually a topic that a poet should, develop.
I don't find any connection between globalization and poetry, honestly, because I think poetry is very huge, and globalization is just a phenomenon. It's on the surface, because poetry is related to human beings' mind. It's the center of the mind. And I feel globalization is just a reflection of the mind. People want to have a convenient life. But I feel like poetry is like in the center of the mind. So no matter how differently the world changed, the poetry is still poetry.
But I think poetry functions differently. I think for many people, poetry, dealing with language, it can be a spiritual practice. I think it's also a philosophical practice. I think with kind of how globalization functions for investments and banking, I think it's a very different way of how poetry works. I would even call it an anti-globalization kind of globalization, if that makes sense. Because so thinking of just right now, I think there's a lot of commonality between anti-globalization movements. Becoming more concerned with, say, environmental issues, more concerned with local issues and the consequences of certain kinds of global business practices. And I think poetry kind of functions more on that kind of definition of globalization.
الطفل الفنان. أريد أن أرسم السماء. ارسمها يا حبيبي. رسمتها. ولماذا تطش الألوان هكذا؟ لأن السماء ليست لها حافات. أريد أن أرسم الأرض. ارسمها يا حبيبي. رسمتها. ومن هذه؟ إنها صديقتي. وأين الأرض في حقيبتها؟ أريد أن أرسم القمر. ارسمه يا حبيبي. لا أستطيع. لماذا؟ تكسره الموجة على الدوام. أريد أن أرسم الجنة. ارسمها يا حبيبي. رسمتها. ولكني لا أجد أي لون. ليس لها لون.
1959년 그해 겨울이 지나고 여름이 시작되어도 봄은 오지 않았다. 복숭아 나무는 채꽃 피기 전에 아주 여것은 열매를 맺고 부림의 살구나무는 시들어갔다. 소년들의 성기에는 까닭없이 고름이 흐르고 의사들은 아프리카까지 이민을 떠났다. 우리는 유학 가는 친구들에게 술 한잔 얻어먹거나 2차 대전 때 남양으로 징용 간 삼촌에게서 뜻밖의 편지를 받기도 했다. 그해 겨울이 지나고 여름이 시작되어도 우리는 봄이 아닌 윤리와 사이비 학설과 싸우고 있었다. 오지 않는 봄이어야 했기에 우리는 보이지 않는 감옥으로 자진해 갔다.
賽狗場，我不會問這種傻問題，比如狗為什麼要跑，它可以拒絕奔跑。我也不會問，比如為什麼要追逐一隻電動小白兔，它可以拒絕速度。進步主義的歌在奏鳴，機器的工作是耗損他們。我也曾在那跑道曬黑了童年，如今被單調的工作反覆按摩撕裂。彷彿上場的只等待完場，彷彿他們攻成一個問號就是答案，彷彿世界非黑即白，分作成主人工人，倒圖看客。語變不痛的他們繼續演着喧鬧的默劇，對於我們這種忠誠朋友，必要時會撒一泡尿來回答。
Cleaning flakes from grass. Declaring past concrete and masonry ridge-bound, light perceived first green, tessellated banksia brushed forward against blue wind and chipped. Evening, morning passes grasses contamination, white lead flakes slow curl around stone, blades, debris and coincidental cell drifting. Lines I improve, boundaries erode, discontinuous nature and the sun's modern glare, just as pigment ratio can supply chlorophyll for Malevich's taking in the rye. Or gloss Corrier's flower and vibration as pollen. War's vanguard briefed to crest an edge of blank elements of reference. The bright Pacific's serious technologies timing spray below. Each flake or strip of paint, picked by the eye and equal as a handful to centuries of earth, mock canvas split blue by fine contrails radiating north overhead to America.
قطيعة على الأقل مع الثقافة السائدة ومع الحياة السائدة، لكن لكل ثورة خصوصية أيضا ولا تعمم. فيما يتعلق بالبلاد العربية والثقافة العربية لا يمكن الكلام على ثورة شعبية إذا لم نتكلم عن الأساس الذي بنيت عليه الثقافة العربية وهو الدين الإسلامي. لأن الدين الإسلامي ليس مجرد معتقد، وإنما هو أخلاق وهو عمل وهو فن في الآن. ولذلك الكلام على الشعر والكلام على اللغة العربية يقتضي بالضرورة الكلام على الدين.
I would like to specifically speak about the Iraqi poetry in this, under this light of the theme. Well, the Arabic poetry, there's, in terms of classical modern, we have something called Amudi poetry. And there was a debate until now about legality, illegality of this. If this poetry is not, and the poets, modern poets defending it, saying it has some kind of inner rhythm. Some rhythm, inner rhythm, not the line, because it's not a line.
Desde mi país, España, yo puedo hablar de lenguas grandes y pequeñas. Hablamos del tamaño, del número de hablantes de estas lenguas, porque todas las lenguas son grandes lenguas. Respecto al aspecto de la evolución y revolución en poesía, que yo he interpretado también como la tensión entre tradición y originalidad, yo diría que un poeta original toma de la tradición, bebe de la tradición y salta, salta. Y me parece que es el salto lo que importa, esa especie de mutación de algo cualitativamente distinto que se produce.
我个人，我深知这个词呢，它所引起的一种暴力的效果，同时也知道它的魔力，这个很奇怪，就是魔力，这个魅力和暴力，它总是结伴而行的。对写诗的而言，这个词是非常危险的，因为他们有很多的想象，他们比较敏感。
Kamukha mo si Paraluman nung tayo ay bata pa, at ang galing-galing mong sumayaw, mapabugi man o cha-cha, ngunit ang paborito.
At 13, I broke a tooth in a dream and for days tapped each tooth in my mouth with my tongue, searching for cracks. At 17, I lived with 3 strangers, and at 21, I got chickenpox exactly 2 weeks before graduation. I do not smoke pot if there is no one in the room I would like to sleep with. Mannequins make me nervous, as do poorly ventilated diners. I am always a little disappointed when the person I am calling picks up the phone. I have a hard time watching movies with scenes of rape and torture in them. I would rather not have a conversation begin with, "We need to talk," although experience has taught me that what follows is not necessarily terrible news.
Newton, force at a distance, imperialism. The one waitress in spiky sotto voce to the bearded owner behind the coffee shop counter about some cranky bill keeps saying 1665, 1665. And I think, important year for Newton, fluxions, etc., theory of colors, gravity growing to the orb of the moon. Gold River, Muchalat Inlet, the rocks in these empty parts, because of their loneliness, even misanthropy, are giant principal warehouses of the Lucasian professor's force. They hoard their plates of theorems, locked drawers of stresses.
越车越远。喜欢写虫卵般的字，一粒一粒的写，肚子里养了一叠婴儿蟹，像玻璃弹珠那么艳。有一天，他们给他拉来一条铁轨，教他在头顶喷烟，于是他就车起来了，对着铁轨，对着屋檐。
我很精明，我很好奇，我是地心引力。
他唱，
如何不败疲累？谁在谁的边界？
他唱。车过窗下的时候，他的男人在窗里望他，手里握着一节交流垫。他垂着脸，像是货柜里的老肉桂。他的牛在窗里望他， 他的砚台，在窗里望他。他们困惑极了，不断从眼睛挤出墨汁与奶，滴滴答答。
Drws yn Epynt. This isn't Egypt, this is Epynt, Wales. Ar ôl I wraig gofyn I swyddog gwrfyddin am gael cadw I drws. Mae yna drws sydd yn cau yn ei gyfer, a drws sydd yn drysu amser, a'r gnoc sydd yn destun dwyster. Ac mor anial oedd ei hanedd, yr aelwyd hon oedd man cyfanedd dan ddrws doi Cirwyn Tangnefedd. Ni dadwy, na chroes I rhyd a orfi, na gelyn dim ond cenad deddfi, lle perffaith i'r fyddin I saethu.
飛天棺材，即係香港嘅16座小巴。凌晨5時被雷聲劈醒，醒來第一句想跟你說的話是我們的算計都錯誤了。房子外面有一條公路，公路上有一種飛天棺材，棺材內的16條性命只交給一個司機。如果他不喝酒、不抽煙、不談手提電話，如果天不下雨、不長霧，路邊不閃出小狗或老人，我相信是可以長命富貴的。凌晨5時從黑洞醒來才記起，我們的愛情是開在公路上的飛天棺材，隨時會死在半途上。
Levanta los ojos y pájaros por azar cruzan el cielo y es del aire su ausencia. La luz que nos alivia era de azar y noche aquella claridad, un cantar que venía sin música porque era dentro la música y breve. Se va viviendo dentro de los ojos. Alarga la polilla como un pavo, ceniza su abanico, ánima 11, lo que fue del amor, ojo y patitas. Vio tesoros de luz, donde están la nieve y el granizo y el rocío y la lluvia, un vaso de cristal, la penumbra en suspenso.
on which stated there are three factors to success.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Let our journey's companions be blessed by radiance.
一座空房子，这多年留在墙壁上沉默的声音。
每个人说几句话，让大家除了主要是有一种这种接触。
My poetry is, maybe you could say, kind of surrealistic, if I had to say something about it.
For the past 10 years, I've worked at New Directions publishing house. I'm Dunya's editor.
Typhoon Haiyan, known as Yolanda, back home, and I have only spoken to a few people so far upon arrival, and most, if not all of them, have expressed sympathy for the tragedy that had.
当世界上的一切都没有什么可以言说的时候，表达的时候，只有诗歌，它和爱情一样，能够表达出最深刻、最本质的东西。
شكرا لكم جميعا.
Tengo lugar y no tengo paisaje, yo menos tengo patria. En mi dedo hago el fuego y en mi corazón te canto, la cuerda de mi corazón llora. Vámonos, la tierra el amor, la tierra el amor. No tengo lugar y no tengo paisaje, que yo menos tengo patria. La tierra el amor, la tierra el amor. A cuando llora con tu color, que nuestras mujeres te hechizan. La tiene el amor, 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 la tiene el amor.